Okay, let's move on to the last concept of this unit, and it's confidence intervals. So let's go ahead and read this example and see, and just kind of break it down so you can understand all the words that you see. So a telephone survey of 600 randomly selected people was conducted in an urban area. The survey determined that 76% of people from the ages of 18 to 34 have a social networking account. So that may be like Twitter or Facebook or Snap or whatever. The results are accurate within plus or minus 4 percent points 19 times out of 20. So you may have seen this sentence here before, and it can be confusing as to what it means. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, is what that sentence actually means. Okay? So we're going to kind of go back and forth. So here's some new words for you. So margin of error. It's the difference between the estimate of the value you're trying to determine as found from the sample and the true value from the population. So that sounds a lot, really quite hard to understand, but it's just this plus minus number. So when we go back and look here, margin of error is plus minus 4 percent points, or 4%. So our margin of error is plus minus 4%. What I want you to think of margin of error as, it's your wiggle room. Okay? So what this is saying is that, look, it was a survey, right? So if you were to ask another 600 individuals in an urban area, what are the odds of you getting that exact same answer out again? Well, depending on how good of a survey it is, it could be fairly close. This is our wiggle room. Okay, so we're saying that that number should be accurate to within plus or minus 4%. So if I were to ask another 600 people, I should get within plus minus 4% of the original data. Okay, that's the margin of error. The next one is confidence interval. So what we do for our confidence interval is we apply that plus minus to our actual survey result. So you take your survey result and you add and minus the margin of error number. So if we go back to our original question here, so it says 76% of people aged 18 to 34 have a social networking account, plus minus 4%. So we're going to take our 76%, and we're going to add 4%, and we're going to minus 4%. So our confidence interval is 72% to 80%. So what that means, if we were to ask another 600 people, age 18 to 34, how many social networking accounts they have, we're expecting 72 to a number somewhere between 72 and 80. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't end up with 65 one time, or we could end up with 96 one time, but it shouldn't happen that often. Okay? Our results should be 72 to 80% of responders have that social networking account. As long as it's A, good question, and B, we're picking a random sample. Now, in earlier grades, specifically grade 9, you learned about that. You learned about bias, and you learned about how to pick good sample questions so that you get good results. So the last one is the confidence level, or in other words, how confident are you? This one essentially shows how good of a survey you created. So right here it says 19 times out of 20. So what we do is we take that number from our question, that 19 times out of 20, and that becomes our confidence level. Now it's almost always shown as a percent. So if I just go 19 divided by 20 and times it by 100%, that gives us 95%. So if we bring all of this together, what that is essentially saying is that if I ask another 600 people, and then I ask another 600 people, then I ask another 600 people, if I do that 20 times, then 19 of those 20 times, or 95% of the time, I should end up with 72 to 80% having that social networking account. Okay, so these three words, margin of error, confidence interval, and confidence level, they all play along together. Okay, So I'm just going to scroll through a little bit here, and I'm going to give another example. So it says a market research firm found that among online shoppers, 89% search online for at least one other seller carrying the same product when shopping on the internet. So what that means is that if you're in let's say you want to get a new pair of Nikes, you might go to Nike.com and Amazon.ca, or maybe you'll go to SportCheck and Nike.com, or maybe you'll shop around. So it's saying that 89% of people go to at least one other site, or in other words, at least two sites when they're shopping for an item online. So it says here, this survey is considered accurate within plus minus 3.5% points 99% of the time. So the margin of error is plus minus 3.5. What the margin of error is, it's just like your standard deviation. It's just like it. It's what you add and subtract to that central number. So 89% is your middle. So you're going to add plus 3.5 and minus 3.5. So if I go 89 minus 3.5, I get 85.5%. And if I go 89 plus 3.5, I get 92.5%. Okay, so that's my confidence interval. And then my confidence level, super high. In other words, these guys think they really did a good survey. So they're saying that 99% of the time, they are expecting between 85.5% and 92.5% of people go to at least one other site, or at least two sites whenever they purchase anything online. Okay? Now, how did these numbers mess around? Well, if we were to lower our margin of error, let's say, so if we were to lower our margin of error, let's say I lowered that number to 1.5%. That's going to make the confidence interval smaller, right? Because now I'm adding and subtracting 1.5, not 3.5. So if this is my wiggle room, am I going to be as confident in my results? No. Your confidence level will probably drop to, let's say, 95%. Because now this is going to be a much smaller range of values. So if I decrease my standard deviation, if I make my wiggle room smaller, then I'm going to lose confidence in my results. Now, another way we can interpret this, it didn't say in this question how many people they polled. Okay, let's say they polled 1,000 people, and that's how they got this number, the 3.5% and all that. But what if they polled 5,000 people? What do you think would happen? Well, the more people you ask, what should happen? Your confidence goes up, and you should have less wiggle room because you've asked more people, so you shouldn't need to have as high of a wiggle room. Okay? And you're going to be even more confident. Maybe you'd go up to 99.5%. No one's ever 100% because of outliers. Okay? If anybody says they're 100% accurate, that means that they have asked every single person in a population, and that's almost impossible to do. Okay, so let's look at this one here. Actually, let's go to this example. Whoops. Let me just keep scrolling here to find it. Okay, so it says a poll was conducted to ask voters the following question. If an election were held today, whom would you vote for? So the results indicated that 53% would vote for Smith and 47% would vote for Jones. So 53% would vote for Smith and 47% would vote for Jones. So right now it's not looking good for Jones, right? Looked like Smith has got it in the bag. The results were stated as being accurate to within 3.8% point 19 times out of 20. So if you go 19 divided by 20, so they're 95% confident in these results. So if we look at the confidence interval, so again we're going to go 53, we're going to go minus 3.8 and plus 3.8. And for Jones, we're going to go minus 3.8 and plus 3.8. Okay, so just give me a second here to punch that into my calculator. So 53 minus 3.8 is 49.2%. And 53 plus 3.8 is 56.8. For Jones, we have 43.2% and 50.8%. Okay, now what this means. It means that Smith, in fact, does not have it in the bag. If you look at Smith's lowest number, that's 49.2%. If you look at Jones's highest number, it's 50.8%. So could Jones upset Smith in a victory? Yes, he could. So this is what happened with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in their election, in that when they looked at the actual numbers, it looked like Hillary had the massive population, like she had a much bigger number here than Trump did. But when you looked at the confidence interval, because what happened in the Trump-Clinton election was a lot of people were undecided. A lot of people were undecided. And so when you factored in that confidence interval, you ended up with her lowest being lower than his highest. Now, that wasn't the only reason why he won, and I don't want to get into the American election system because it's very confusing. I don't think I actually even understand it all. But when you're looking at survey results, it is extremely important that you focus on that right there. Okay? Also, the confidence. How confident are they? So these people are 95% confident in these results. Now, I have seen some data put out. Whoops. Whoa, what's going on there? Okay. I have seen some data put out by some, specifically on CNN and in certain newspapers. I have seen some confidence levels at 80%. So they're saying what this means then is that if that's a fairly low number, they're saying, look, if we were to do this, ask another bunch of people who they think they're going to vote for, if that number is low, they're not actually very confident in their choice. Either it's because a lot of people are undecided, or maybe they didn't really ask a broad spectrum of people. Maybe they only asked people from one state, and you know down the states, or even in Canada, right? Albertans tend to vote very differently than Ontario. Newfoundland votes very, very differently than Manitoba. Okay, even within Alberta itself, Edmonton area votes often very different than the southern portion. Because again, different demographics, different needs from the government. So when you're looking at how confident they are, so what their confidence level is, and you look at the wiggle room, which is the margin of error, okay? So if this is a really big number, so let's say this was plus minus 8%, that tells me then that they're not very confident. So if their wiggle room's really big, remember, if the wiggle room's really big, you're going to have a really large range because that's the number you're adding and subtracting. That's like those babies, remember the babies sleeping, right? 95% of babies sleep between 8 hours and 16 hours a night. Well, that really doesn't say anything. There's a huge difference between 8 hours a night and 16 hours a night. Okay? So that survey wasn't very accurate because of how varied the numbers are. So if the wiggle room is really big, that means the confidence level is low. Okay? If the wiggle room is small, then the confidence should actually be pretty high. Okay? Also, the more people you ask, the more confident your results should be. So the more people you ask, the higher your confidence level. Okay? So again, if you have troubles on any of the questions on the assignment, don't be afraid to ask. And we will see you on the next assignment.